Next on Global, the UN climate change chief has appealed for the world to use efforts to tackle global warming as a way to create unity between nations at a time of conflict. Patricia Espinosa was speaking as negotiators from almost 200 countries meet in Bonn to prepare for the UN COP27 meeting, which will take place in Egypt in November. Ms. Espinosa said COP27 would be held in a world beset by conflicts with energy, food and economic crises. But she appealed for people not to lose hope. Let's go now to Bonn. Our science correspondent, Victoria Gill, is there. Hi, Victoria.
Hi there. Yes, indeed. So we're just amongst the first day of this event, and the first plenary session, the first discussion actually ran over by about 3 hours. Lots to work through, but the negotiations really start tomorrow. And one of the issues that's going to be tackled amid this mixture of crises that the world is facing at the moment, we're in a very different place to where we were 6 months ago at COP26. We have the crisis of the war in Ukraine, an energy crisis, hikes in the price of living and the cost of food. And in amongst all of those costs, the financial issues at the heart of climate change that are hitting the poorest countries and the poorest people hardest still have not been solved. It's something that was high up on the agenda at COP26, but it's been a source of frustration. And someone who has been watching these negotiations closely is Adrian Martinez Blanco from La Clima del Ruta. Did I get the NGO name correct?
La Ruta del Clima, almost.
La Ruta del Clima. I'm so sorry. Thank you very much, Adrian, for joining us. Can you just explain for our viewers, when we talk about the finance that's needed for people facing the problems of climate change now, loss and damage to their lives and their property, what are we talking about that is costing people so much?
Well, it's one of the issues that scares a lot developed countries and in general every negotiator in this UNFCCC or arena. However, it's not an issue that is new. It's something that we know from the beginning, from the creation of the UNFCCC, that is needed, and that is included in the Paris Agreement, but it does not have any funding. That does not imply that women and vulnerable communities are not paying for it directly. That's already happening. And even though for example, in the UNFCCC right now, it's not an agenda item, it's something that is avoided, it's still happening, and it's still people from their pockets without government support are dealing with it financially.
So essentially people are paying for the losses that they're suffering from, say, extreme weather and storm surges out of their own pockets because there is no mechanism for financial support where they can get to this money.
Sure, and usually it's the least responsible for causing climate change. And we know that financial support for climate action is needed, and especially when you are from a very vulnerable community that has a very low carbon footprint, but are facing incredibly huge costs of climate impacts, and you have no means to pay for it, and you're being held responsible for the irresponsible use of carbon emissions by many societies, but not your own.
So what would you like to see out of the next 2 weeks as we as negotiators here prepare for COP27? What do you want to see on the agenda that means that this very delayed financial support could become available and people will get the money to pay for the losses they're already suffering?
Well, on one hand, we have here in SB 56 the IPCC telling us that loss and damage is here. On the other hand, we have many negotiators from developed countries not wanting to have loss and damage even in the agenda. So let's start there to have it as a permanent agenda item. Then we can keep going with the Glasgow dialogue on loss and damage and iron out the details on how the facility on loss and damage should work and how can we finance it. But at least we should have an honest, direct and continuous conversation on loss and damage, because it is in the Paris Agreement and it's something that is violating the human rights of millions of people across the world.
Why has it been so contentious? Why is it something that's still not on the agenda for richer countries to pay for the losses and the damage being experienced?
Well, I guess it's seen something that is a new responsibility, a new liability that may come, a new charge that they might feel in their economies, but it's in reality it's a negative externality that is already affecting the economy of women and poor communities across the world. So it's not something, their attitude of avoiding it does not make it disappear. It just translates the cost to those that are more vulnerable, and especially women, children, the elderly that are paying for loss and damage right now.
And with the poorest communities experiencing and suffering this the most and paying the most, but amidst all of these crises that are hanging over these negotiations now, particularly the war in Ukraine that is making energy prices spiral. How concerned are you that impact on resources and that pressure is actually going to stall this once again?
I'm extremely concerned because as climate change increases, these sort of conflicts for resources or necessities to address the emerging crisis, and not only long-term crises like like loss and damage are being joined together. And that's sort of the same thing that happens when you're in a poor community in a vulnerable country. You might have already poverty, you might be suffering from the after effects of colonialism and racism and systemic oppression, but then also you have climate change. So that's something that everybody else is feeling too, and it's something that we will continue to experience.
Thank you so much, Adrian Martinez Blanco. Thank you for joining us. And unfortunately, the physics of climate change does not make way or slow down for any of these crises. So this will be hanging over the head of negotiators over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be watching. Now back to you.